Now, the cost of living crisis is biting customers across the world. Inflation is on the rise, and that means food prices are soaring. Price of your daily essentials have spiked. While people stress to afford their groceries, companies around the world are piling up profits. Coca-Cola, for example, hiked the prices of its drinks and chips by 17% from last year. Its profits even went up by 20%, the same way its profits went up last year given the price increase. For years, the price hikes for food products have come in small steps. The companies, even eateries, worry that big hikes can frighten consumers. But over the last year, as wages increased and the cost of the raw ingredients soared, food companies and restaurants started passing along those expenses to customers. But there is another catch. Amid concerns that world economies could be headed for a recession, some companies are continuing to raise prices even if their own inflation-driven costs have been covered. Critics say that the moves are all about increasing profits, not just covering expenses. Although food companies are prominent examples of how rapid inflation is being passed from producers to consumers, the trend is not limited to them. It is evident across a wide variety of industries. Executives from banks, airlines, hotels, consumer goods companies and other firms say that they are finding that customers have money to spend and they can tolerate high prices. Now, to discuss this further, we are being joined by Jonathan Liss from London, who is the Deputy Director of the British Influence, which is an independent think tank. Welcome to the broadcast, Jonathan.
Hello.
Now, Jonathan, this looks like a clear case of one man's loss is another man's profit. But can you break it down for our viewers? How does a company incur money amid rising inflation?
Well, obviously, when you have inflation rising, it means that companies have to spend more to make their products. It might mean that they have to pay their staff more, although it has to be said that a big element of inflation in Britain at the moment, which is obviously the country that I know best, is that inflation is much higher than wage increases, particularly in the public sector. So actually, wages are not rising as high as inflation. But that is the main reason why companies would have to raise their prices, because it obviously costs them more to make their goods. But the problem that we're talking about here is that this is actually not a wage-driven inflation. It's not price-driven inflation. It's actually profit-driven inflation. This is about profiteering because, as you just said, companies have rising costs, but they are increasing their prices above and beyond that in order to make a profit as well.
Exactly. What I'm understanding here is that moves are about increasing profits and not just covering their expenses, as you just mentioned. But I want to ask you, how do you assess this on moral grounds?
Morally, it's indefensible. The quotation that you just gave about companies raising prices beyond their expenses, which is driving inflation further because customers can spend the money, even though we're going into recession globally, particularly in Britain and other countries in Europe. That is indefensible. This is the worst face of capitalism, where major companies that make sometimes profits of billions of dollars can say, we're going to increase our profits, even though some of the poorest people in society who are not seeing wages rise in line with inflation are unable to pay.
All right then. Thanks for joining us on this broadcast, Jonathan. It was a pleasure speaking to you.